Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is December the 4th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control. He does love you, and we do what we do here at the Dan Clements Show, knowing the fear of the Lord. We persuade folks of the truth, and I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the frosty, foggy Hemlock Studios in the central Susquehanna Valley in PA, in the great Keystone State here. I do have the chat room open over on YouTube. And for those of you who have been following me for years, I'm no longer simulcasting over to Blog Talk Radio. I've decided to go with their free program, but I'm still going to be uploading the audio starting today. I had to go through a big whoop-de-doo to eliminate down to 30 hours of my show, and I'm still not quite there. But once I get down to 30 hours, I'm going to take it down to 14 hours, so I have a buffer. And so I'm only going to keep 2 weeks of the show, actually more than 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks of the show, on Blog Talk Radio. And I'll keep, as they get close to being up to my 30-hour limit that I can have on Blog Talk Radio, then I'll be eliminating the older shows. So there's a lot of people that I found out that are still on Blog Talk Radio that are downloading off of Blog Talk Radio, and I put a message, a personal message out to them saying that I'll be, because everything I had to do to get this going, I had to quit using Blog Talk Radio. Now I'm not going to be simulcasting on Blog Talk Radio anymore, but I will be putting episodes on that for the folks that are on Blog Talk Radio that want to follow me just off of Blog Talk Radio. So I'll still get those metrics. My metrics for my analytics for the Dan Clements Show notes page are pretty good. They're climbing. I'm still making sure that everything's still working, because sometimes it takes a couple weeks for everything to get working. Because what I did with the show notes page is, instead of just being like a blog format, I switched it over to a podcast format. And sometimes that takes up to a couple weeks for the two major podcast sources I use is iTunes and Stitcher. And I know iTunes takes a little bit. Stitcher is pretty much working already. So if you're used to downloading at iTunes or Stitcher, they should be both working well right now, because I'm on my own RSS feed off the DanClementsShow.com. Hopefully everybody had a good weekend. Both my favorite football teams had won. Green Bay Packers won their game, and Ohio State took the Big Ten championship. However, they're not going to be in the playoffs. And I have a couple articles in here. I'll just start to show off with this before we get into real serious stuff. I have a couple articles, both of them by David Hookstred over at the Daily Caller. He claims he's not an Ohio State fan. And the one article is Ohio State got hosed by playoff committee. And then he wrote another article, the college football should expand playoffs. And I'm not going to get into the articles. And I'm an Ohio State fan, so I am kind of biased here. But I've always, even way back in the Woody Hayes days, it always irked me that opinions were driving who got to be what, especially before the playoffs and the BCS and stuff like that. It was the AP and a couple other polls and the coaches poll that determined who the number one and number two is. And a lot of times, sometimes it was on the strength of their schedule, and even that was arbitrary, because a team that was weak last year might have went through and was really strong this year, and really all the fundamentals were working for them. They were putting up, running yards on the running, passing yards, tackles, sacks. They could have been doing everything right, but because of their past, they're considered a weak team, even though they're mowing down even maybe some big name competition during this season. So a lot of things are very arbitrary and very much based on opinion. And David Hookstred goes through and he talks about maybe expanding the playoff system, because there's still, even out of Ohio State, there's still some decent schools, I think it's University of Southern Florida is undefeated, and they've always been a pretty decent team, yet they're not in the playoffs at all. And I just had a friend tell me that they had a pretty tough schedule this year, and so they're undefeated and they're still not in the playoffs. But David makes a point here that Alabama didn't win their conference they're not the conference champions of SEC. Ohio State went and beat Michigan, Michigan State, and Penn State, and then Wisconsin to take the Big Ten championship, and they're not in the running for the playoffs. And so I agree. I think we got hosed, but you know, the decision has been made. Nothing can be done now, so we just have to go on, and we just have to try to change things and make things better. My buddy Dave's on the chat room. You're kind of blessed, and like I'm kind of bald. I am greatly blessed, folks. I really am. Even though sometimes, because I do dumb and stupid, I don't believe I deserve the blessings. Yet God loves me that much that, you know, He's going to continue to bless me and mold me and shape me and move me in the direction I need to go. But anyway, that's my little rant about Ohio State. You know, kudos to Ohio State for winning. You know, nothing due to me. I'm just a fan. But kudos to them for winning the Big Ten championship and going on to play in a bowl game. And I can't remember who they're going to play against. It's immaterial. We're going to whoop them. And I just say that. Anyway, one of the things that I was doing over the weekend, besides recuperating from working on the furnace last week, I'm still kind of sore from that because last week I normally do therapy at the Y Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I didn't do any last week because I was working on the furnace and I knew I wouldn't have enough energy to work on hooking up my boiler and everything. All I got to do, I just got I got to hook up one thermostat, the outdoor monitor, you know, thermostatic monitor. I have to hook that up yet, and those two things are mine. I could run it right now without those hooked up, and then I just have to hook up the half-inch water supply to put water in the system. But anyway, I didn't do any therapy last week, and I paid for it over the weekend. I got into the pool this morning, did all my stretches in the water. The water was nice and warm, did everything I was supposed to do, and I feel really good, but I know you know, my energy's starting to go down, and so this afternoon I'll just be working on the show here. So I do apologize for last week, and hopefully that's the last big project that I have on the books that I'm going to be doing. I got some small plumbing things like wax ring underneath the toilet in the upstairs bathroom, just some minor maintenance stuff. We moved a workbench. Some guys from the church came over last Saturday, not this past Saturday, but last Saturday, and helped me move a bench from the outside of the house inside so we could, I'm going to level it up for my wife. That's a minor little project, put a shelf underneath it. One of the men from the church gave her a scroll saw, because she does a lot of wood crafts and stuff like that, and she sells, you know, these small signs, you know, it says "Have a Merry Christmas" or "Home," or, you know, and she does custom signs for folks too. Not signs, but like, well, I guess there are signs because that words on it, and people hang them on their homes. She's working on one now, so she makes a little money on the side doing that, and she wants to expand it a little bit and make some, you know, instead of making just square signs, she wants to take a scroll saw and make some fancy looking stuff. So we're getting that all set up down in the basement, and I'm actually gonna, and it won't take much, but I'm gonna actually hook up a small little dust system to a shop vac an old shop vac I have. So when she does the scroll saw or uses the cutoff saw, it'll capture some of the sawdust. So, you know, like I said, I got a few minor things, but anyway, hopefully I won't have any of these week-long projects anymore like this. When we go to get rid of the wood stove outside, it's mainly just cutting off the Q-PEX pipe, unhooking electrical to it. They pick it up on a trailer. It's got a hoist on it, and it's gone. So that's not a huge project there. But next Saturday, I'm just letting everybody know, in case I'm not on the air Monday, which I don't see why I wouldn't be. This upcoming Saturday, which would be the 9th, I'm going through this week. I'm going to go through and do some initial work. I'm putting adjustable legs on my pallet wood, the John Wayne desk. I'm taking the 2 pallet legs off, and I'm putting the adjustable legs on so I can stand with it while I'm doing the work, you know, show prep and stuff like that. And I'll be on my wobble board for that. And then during the show and after, you know, the post-show stuff, I'll be sitting in my nice comfy oversized office chair and be able to do a little bit more work, hopefully, Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise. So that's everything that's coming up. But the other thing I was doing over the weekend, mainly in the evenings, from pretty much from Friday night on, because Friday, let me see here. I just want to let me open this up in a new tab just so I have the titles right here. Friday's show is Goodbye Net Neutrality, Hello Competition. That was my Free For All Friday show, and I got quite a few views on that. Plus, I had earlier. I had on the November 30th, Friday was the first, November 30th, I had pro net neutrality folks don't understand how free markets actually work. And then the other one that had big reviews or big views on it was net neutrality is fascism. And that one really got some views on it and some comments. And I was over commenting on other shows. And this is one of the things that you do, you know, to be interactive in the community. If someone's talking about what you're talking about, go over and listen to their video, and then if you want to leave comments, you leave comments. Well, I did that on three different videos, and I'm getting a whole host of comments, mostly negative towards me. A lot of them, and I'm not going to use adult content. I'm going to use sinful profanity. They were very profane in their speech towards me, and this is one thing that really irks people off. And I don't do this to irk them off. I do this to let them know this is exactly what I think about profanity when you're trying to have like a civil conversation, putting forth your thoughts, views in a posting like this. I tell them once you resort to name calling or profanity, you've lost the argument. You've lost any credibility of your argument. Because all you're doing is trying to use these words as a shock value and to force. You know, if I swear at this person, it's going to force them to go my way, you know, or force them off of this format here or off this thread on the comment sections. And I'm like, dude, first off, I have, when it comes to arguing or debating or having a conversation about my point of views, I'm like a bulldog. I will stay at it, you know, and not, I don't stay at it until you are converted. I will stay at it as long as you are either misrepresenting yourself or misrepresenting what I'm saying or misrepresenting some type of principle or idea I'm putting forth, like free markets. And I was showing Lori was like, I was laughing when I was answering one this morning. And basically, the guy made my point for me. I said, under net neutrality since May 2015, there really hasn't been any major innovations in the internet. You know, and basically, I have his comment here. Let me see here. Oh, he talks about this certain person. He says, laughing out loud, please show me some data that internet innovation has slowed down since 2015. What exactly is the innovation coming out of Time Warner, Verizon, Comcast, these whole... And it's like, I typed back, I said, do you read the words that are coming out of your keyboard? First, he's asking me he's telling me to point out this lack of, he said, please show me the data that internet innovation has slowed down since 2015. Then in the next sentence, he said there isn't any innovation because of these ISPs. And this is something I've been dealing with all weekend, you know, and I'm happy to try to set the record straight. And this is something I entitled the show, The Constitution, Regulation, and Net Neutrality. One of the themes over the weekend that just would not go away, and this is one of the funniest ones I was having the most fun with, a lot of these pro net neutrality folks, they just don't get it. Like one of my drivers said, I don't get it, Big Dan. They just don't get it. They were saying almost to a person, it's almost like I've talked about before, they're living by a narrative in an echo chamber. They said regulating the internet is not government control. Folks, the government regulations is the very essence of control. It is the very essence of government control. But I was getting a lot of this. Not so much on Facebook. It was on the YouTube comments. I was glad for the interaction. And as a matter of fact, Barnacles Nerdgasm actually not praised me, but he thanked me. He says, "Boy, I'm thankful that you're on here as conservative. You're not sitting there lighting on fire the comment section here. You're nice. You're tolerable. All that kind of stuff on there." And he thanked me for that. And I kidded him a little bit, back on the response, but I also thanked him for the compliment. Because it's not my intent to go on and blow up comment sections. My intent to try to put out the truth. And it's not the truth as I see it. It's the truth as I've found it through research, study, and understanding. And so that was one of the things that regulating the internet has nothing to do with government control. So I was having a lot of fun with that one. The other one I was having fun with was I had a guy, he was telling me about your delusional free markets, which has never existed in the history of mankind. And he had like 4 points, and then he made some comments. And I answered back all 4 points. And not only to him, but there was other folks that were really knocking free market principles, okay? And so in the 4th point, I remember this because I finished it up this morning. In the 4th point, I said, so you're telling me that free market principles do not exist anywhere in the world, especially America. And I said, how many grocery stores do you have in your area that you can avail yourself on actually buying groceries outside of convenience stores, but you could actually put those on there too? Lori and I counted up 7 that we've actually used. The one is like a last minute, in case we just don't want to go that far, one of these old country markets that is a little on the expensive side, but if we're out that way and we need something, we'll stop her and get it, rather than run all the way back into Sunbury. This is out towards Elysburg, PA. So we counted up 7 different grocery stores we can go to and shop. And my wife has been shopping around all these stores enough that she knows which group of items she can get the best deal on. And sometimes she'll shop at Walmart for, let's say, meats. I'm just throwing this out there. Sometimes she'll shop at Walmart just for the meats. And then she'll go to Aldi's for like the canned goods and some box goods and stuff like that, cereal and stuff, because she gets the best deals there for like her cereal, macaroni and cheese. My daughter loves boxed macaroni and cheese, and I'm kind of a huge fan of it too. But anyway, we're talking about grocery stores. I asked the person, I said, how many grocery stores can you shop at? How many department stores do you have that you can choose from? Walmart to Target to Kohl's to Boschko's, a local chain in our area. How many of those Kmart, which is going out of business, but it's still there. How many department stores? We got a whole mall. Susquehanna Valley Mall is full of stores down there that, different stores, clothing, electronics, games, food, restaurants. I didn't include that. Restaurants. How many restaurants can you go out to? Fast food or otherwise? How many choices do you have? How many choices do you have when it comes to buying tires? My buddy Dave lives down outside of a big metropolitan area around Nashville, Tennessee. I imagine he's probably got 10 times the choices of, let's say, tires than I do around here, but I still have a multitude. I just went through, my thinking. I was counting on fingers, including my local mechanic that works on my cars. He can get me tires too at a good price. I counted over 15 in our area that I can get tires at different places. Plus, and that's not even including online shopping. I didn't even include that in. I was just talking about brick and mortar stores. All these choices that you have. Gasoline. How many convenience stores or gas stations? There's hardly any gas stations anymore, but how many different convenience stores can you get gasoline at nowadays? There's a bunch. There's a bunch. And this is all because of the free market. Now, are there government regulations in the free market? Yes. In my opinion, would it be better in the free market without these government regulations? I believe so. And I'll give you 2 good examples, because this is the 3rd thing that came up over the weekend and into this morning. Was this one guy, he was like just hammer me with profanity and saying, getting rid of regulations have never helped anything in the history of the country. And so I typed back in there my response to him. I said, look, first off, I'm talking from a position of knowledge and authority here when I'm talking about the trucking industry. I am a third generation. My grandfather Clements was a truck driver. My dad was a truck driver until the day he retired. I was a truck driver until the day I had to retire because of my neck injuries. I herniated the same disc twice, and I couldn't drive truck anymore. I was in dispatch for quite a few years. I was in recruiting and driver training for a handful of years. So I know of where I speak. Back in the early 80s, this is all part of the economic growth of the Reagan era that a lot of even libertarians, they zone in just on the taxes. Well, the taxes didn't account for all this, but they didn't go any further than this. Yes, the taxes helped, but the other side of the taxes, and this is where I think libertarians and some economists get in trouble, where they're talking about, well, we got to cut spending. When you cut regulations, that is cutting spending. Maybe not tax dollar spendings, but you're cutting the spending of consumers and businesses when you cut regulations. So in the early 80s, one of the first things Ronald Reagan did in his first term was deregulate the trucking industry. And I remember that, because when I got out of the Navy, I was, like I said, I'm third generation. I started actually actively driving truck 84, 85 for the tool rental. I drove a flatbed for him because I was the only one with a chauffeur's license. And, and then there was a couple of years in between. Then I started full time driving in 89 and then, went from there. And I went through I grandfathered in on the CDL because I had my Class A in Pennsylvania before CDL came in. I grandfathered into that. All I had to do is take the test. And I know all about the hours of service and some of the regulations that they've brought up now that Trump's transportation secretary and the Department of Transportation is trying to roll back some of these idiotic, the 14-hour rule, and taking, if you take 24 hours off, you get to reset your clock, but you got to jump through a couple hoops before that can happen, and just craziness. You're trying to re-regulate the trucking industry. But if it wasn't for Ronald Reagan deregulating certain things, flight controllers, he busted that union wide open, and deregulated that. Deregulated the trucking industry. And again, there people were screaming and hollering, oh, the sky's going to fall, the sky's going to fall. And it didn't. My dad was one of them. I said, Dad, it's going to bring more competition, and you'll see. Because before that, for a guy to try to buy a truck and be an independent contractor was almost nigh impossible. I wasn't saying that it was impossible, but man, it was super, super hard because the barrier of entry was way high, because through regulation, you had a handful of trucking companies that were, had the government license, as it were, for the industry, and that was it. When they deregulated that, they took that out of the way, and you talk about prices for shipping things coming way down. Then you had, different trucking equipment, 53-foot trailers, a whole smattering of things. J.B. Hunt actually saving the railroad, Norfolk and Southern, by designing their trailers like bogie trailers, like containers, and started shipping those on Norfolk and Southern out in Chicago. And pretty much that partnership saved Norfolk and Southern, and it made J.B. Hunt one of the biggest trucking companies in America. And they like quadrupled their freight haulage, because what they did was they went to regional operations and put their trailers on train trailers, on carriages, and could ship them across the country to all these different railroad heads, and just have regional drivers that would stay out the week and come home on the weekends, deliver them and pick up and bring stuff back. He revolutionized the partnership of between trucking companies and railroads. I don't want to belabor that, but I pointed these out to these guys and said, getting rid of regulation doesn't help anything. Now, the other thing I pointed out was the great light bulb regulations under President Obama. where his EPA, they got rid of incandescent light bulbs in favor of CFCs, the compact fluorescents. And there's a problem with those. They have mercury in them, so you're supposed to dispose them the right way. How many people actually do? And the light stinks coming off of them. Well, lo and behold, it was like, I think it was almost 2 years ago now. Maybe it was just last year in 2016. It might have been just last year. MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, actually developed an incandescent light bulb that you could go right back up to your 100 watt, that use less power than the equivalent 100 watt in the CFC light bulbs, little curlicue light bulbs. And that's innovation. Yet, the last I found out, until they overturn that regulation about the light bulbs, they can't bring that to market because it's an incandescent light bulb, even though it actually does better than the ones that the Obama administration and Democrats in Congress got passed. Maybe that was back in his first term. I can't remember. It's been a while, I think, maybe. I think it was in Obama's first term that they got rid of the incandescent light bulbs, but I think it was last year MIT came up with this, and it's like the private sector will always do a better job than the government. Will always do a better job than the government. And it drives a lot of these, and I'm coming to find out that a lot of these gamers out there, not all of them, I'm not going to broad brush every one of them, but a lot of these gamers out there, a lot of these technocrats that are online that have these, like Linus and some of these other YouTube channels that are really big and they're really heavy in the technology. When you hear them talk about politics, they are very progressive. They're very socialistic in it, and that's what net neutrality is. It's more fascism than it's socialism, but it's still authoritarian. It's still economic fascism where the government is actually going in and controlling an industry in that. So I had a lot of fun. It was mainly in the evenings, commenting on a lot, especially the YouTube channel stuff, the comments on it. I had a lot of fun doing that. And like I said, I wasn't berating anybody. I was just making these points, going down, answering their points and making a few more of my own. And I was showing them to my wife this morning. She read this one line. She goes, what kind of people are you having to deal with? And I said, this type. Show me some proof where there hasn't been any innovation since 2015. And then they go on to say, because of the ISPs, there hasn't been any innovation. Do you read the words that are coming out of your keyboard? Again, it just amazes me. It just amazes me. The official drink of the Dan Clemens Show is Rocky Mountain High Brand. It is a hemp-infused, a hemp oil-infused drink. For a 16-ounce can, it has 100 milligrams of hemp oil in it, and it does help with the pain. For me, with fibromyalgia, it absolutely helps with the pain. Doesn't take it all away, but it helps to dull it. They have all sorts of different flavors. They have power shots. They have protein bars that are hemp infused. And they also have Eagle Spirit Water, which is an alkaline water. And the reason why I made them the drink of the show is because, full disclosure, I have stock in them. Hopefully the stock goes up. It's been hovering. It's a penny stock right now, and it's been hovering around the same area for a while. But they're having a lot of and this is what I don't understand about some of these investors. And there's a lot of in these penny stocks. I didn't realize how many day investors, that they, it goes up a couple cents, they sell it, and it comes in a penny stock. You don't have to sell a lot of stock to affect the price. The price comes back down, they buy back in, they wait for it to go up a couple pennies. I didn't really understand how many day traders are actually in penny stocks. It amazes me how many are in there, but they're putting out a lot of capital right now to build a plant up in the Catskills in New York. And I believe once that gets going and they get the capacity coming out of that, right now they're having issues with keeping up with the demand of it. And they're building something here. So just full disclosure, I do own stock in them in my retirement portfolio. Today's daily Bible reading comes out of the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 1, verses 1 through 4. The beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, as it is written in the prophets, behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. The voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. John came baptizing in the wilderness and preaching a baptism of repentance for the remission of sins. This is the, in the Gospel of Mark, it starts off talking about John the Baptist and what his purpose was. He was the forerunner that declared the kingdom of Jesus Christ was at hand and was coming. Today's quote meal comes from Janet Oakey. A quiet morning with a loving God puts the events of the upcoming day into proper perspective. It absolutely does. And trust me, I tell you, the mornings that I neglect to do so, I don't have very good days. I really don't. And so this is a quiet morning with a loving God puts the events of the upcoming day in proper perspective. Let me get a shot of my coffee here. Short Bible lesson comes from Al Shannon over at Biblical Proof. Greed is deadly. Greed is deadly. Good article. I encourage everybody to go and read that. And you know what? Greed just does not affect the rich. Greed affects the poor also when they covet what somebody else doesn't, or what somebody else has and they don't have, or they steal, or they kill for it. Greed is deadly. I wanted to start off the show with this article here, and let me get over here and get my Firefox set up here with this. Our culture is experiencing a hostile takeover. We must stop rejecting God if we want it to end. And I'm really, it's a good article here. It was written by, let me get back over here, by Samantha Sorbo, Kevin Sorbo's wife. The recent Texas church shooting, the terrorist driving a truck through a crowd in New York City, and the Las Vegas massacre may seem shocking, but to anyone who has been paying attention, they should not. Our culture is undergoing a hostile takeover. American society used to be governed by Judeo-Christians do unto others morals, but we have drifted, been pushed really, into a hedonistic YOLO, you only live once cultural morass. The upshot of this is a distinct lack of respect for human life in general, as well as a pervasive, insidious obsession with self. And let me stop the reading there. I also believe that it is, along with what she was talking about here, with the distinct lack of respect for human life, I believe it's also not only a lack of respect for human life, but a lack of respect for the individual and the lack of respect for the rights of the individual. This is huge. This is very, very huge here. I'll read on. This is the me generation, the selfie culture, the entitlement mentality. And what is entitlement except the narcissistic assumption of deserving and demanding what is not earned? Our cultural crisis is exhibited by egotistic multimillionaires demonstrating on football fields against the police instead of seeking solutions to rampant inner city violence, coddled young people demanding free birth control and socialized health care, and even the major media ignoring the corruption trial of Senator Robert Menendez, Democrat, New Jersey. No amount of self-love can fill the God-shaped hole in someone's heart. We are created and called to love each other, and not self-absorbed spa treatments or Instagram posts and no self-absorbed spa treatment or Instagram post can supplant or our innate yearning for the love from God. Another example of the crisis is the lack of attention the mainstream media are paying to the Clintons' collusion to sell Russia 20% of the U.S. Uranium. We've replaced our moral imperative to do what's right with a personal obsession of what's in it for me. But no amount of self-love can fill the God-shaped hole in someone's heart. We are created and called to love each other, and no self-absorbed spa treatment or Instagram post can supplant our innate yearning for love from God. The spirit of our time is gradually revealing in our culture a subversive, resolute, and increasing hatred towards God and Christianity, and an irresistible temptation towards evil that betrays man's innate desire for power, the longing to be God. The Harvey Weinsteins of the world, and they are myriad, both in Hollywood and out, seek to force others to do their will, much like they envision a capricious God would be if they believed in such a being. It is much easier, however, to deny God than to acknowledge him. God, being good, condemns evildoers. So like a child throwing a tantrum in a toy store, some people must deny the existence of God and his inherent goodness and lord their power over weaker people. I can make you watch me shower. Socially, still trading in our inherited moral capital might verbally condemn the behavior, but that's just lip service because we've succumbed to the YOLO morale, relativism, and forgotten our metric of right and wrong. I forbid you to see me as a sex object, screamed the gal in the pink hat. And those who claim they wanted to expose the bully, and they all say that now, confess they are too afraid of retribution. Translation, I like my money and my position more than I believe in right and wrong. Followers on social media beat morals every day of the week in the YOLO land. When a righteous dad wanted to expose a high-powered elitist climbing in bed with youngsters, the Hollywood leftists and atheists sided with the pedophile over the conservative. Status is more important than your virtue in YOLO land. The growing YOLO culture seeks to silence the stalwart dissent of facts. Feelings are more important than truth in YOLO land. And let me stop reading there. A lot of the comments I got over the weekend, that we were discussing about net neutrality, was they were like, I feel this or I feel that. It wasn't I think, or these are the facts as I've researched them or saw them. A lot of it was about their feelings, and this is something it's hard to fight against somebody's feelings. So you shouldn't even really try. You should stick with the facts as you've researched them until you've been proven wrong. Threatened by disagreement privilege, yelling triumphs over logic. Yelling triumphs over logic. That's the same principle these guys using profanities, guys and girls using profanities in their comments back to somebody. They're yelling. Blah, 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 listen, frontin', fruitin', frontin', stuff like that. And they're trying to intimidate with their language, actually. Self-destructive loathing and jealousy stems from the hypocrisy that started in kindergarten when children are taught you are an accident of nature and survival of the fittest is the law of the land. Now, don't bully. And you know what? As far as the bullying part, I've never seen, in me growing up, now, I know now the bullies are protected by the schools. But when I was growing up, bullies always got their comeuppance. They just did. And I'm not bragging about this, I hated bullies. I really did. And I hated people ganging up on somebody else. And one fight in particular, it was in the boys' bathroom. The one boys' bathroom by the entrance coming into the one side of the school was huge. And two guys got in a fight over, I can't even remember what they got in a fight over. I just remember they got in a fight. I was in there using the restroom, and I come out, and they're on the floor rolling around there. And then the one guy got on top of the other guy and started slugging him. And a guy right in front of me went to go in there, and he was talking about, I heard him saying that he was supporting the guy that was getting his backside whooped. He went in and grabbed the other guy, and I grabbed him by the shoulder and drug him back. And I was at least a head taller than he was and had 40, 50 pounds on him. And I pulled him back and I said, you know what? And the other guy started. The guy was getting whooped. He's the one that started it. And this guy was on top and was finishing it. And he didn't hit him a lot. He hit him a few times, and then he was going to get up. And the other guy, when he did get up, he ran out of the bathroom. So I never liked people ganging up on anybody. I didn't like bullies. And I would stand up to the bullies whether I could whoop them or not. Because usually when you stand up to bully, it takes a lot of their power away from them. But you can't do that anymore. God forbid if another student stood up against a bully. They'd be the one getting in trouble, not the bully, in today's society. Anyway, I digress. And And so they distrust the dark abyss of irreligion even as they embrace it. Attacks against the only one who preached forgiveness and grace, goodness and love, and anyone who supports him will increase. He challenges the YOLO worldview taught in public schools as it becomes more and more costly to be an adherent of Christianity, with stories of the persecution of bakers, florists, teachers, and t-shirt makers splashing across newspapers every day. The truth gathers defenders. Though meant to intimidate us, these stories do the opposite. They galvanize Christians to stand firm in the light of understanding and the peace that surpasses it. The people who still trade in the Judeo-Christian ethic of love one another and life has value are not called simply to defend their position, but to fight for it. Before the overwhelming tide of YOLO, selfishness inundates us with the intolerance and bigotry integral to the religion of self. The YOLO culture divides people against each other. To survive and prosper as a nation, we must reaffirm our Judeo-Christian heritage, indivisible under God, because if you only live once, it's survival of the fittest, and it's all about you, then laws are meaningless. As recovering international fashion model who adores shoes, Sam Sorbo produced the film Let There Be Light, opening October 27th. This just opened a month or so ago. I'm waiting for it to come out on Amazon or Netflix or something before I see it, because I don't go to theaters much anymore because of my condition. But anyway, I like what she's saying here, and I want to see that movie. I'm really interested in it. Matter of fact, Sean Hannity is a producer. He actually helped fund the producer helps the funding. He also had a small cameo role in the movie, so I'm looking forward to that. But I think this is important here, and I see this coming out, folks, in this argument over net neutrality, whether we should have it or not. And I can see a lot of the things what Sam was saying here in this article. I can see a lot of these things actually coming to fruition when I discuss these topics. Like the government, we have a constitution. We're a constitutional representative republic. That's a big word. You say that to a lot of people and their eyes glass over and they're like, huh? They don't know. They don't know that the government has constraints on them. They don't know what Article 1, Section 8 is of the Constitution. They don't know these things. All they have in their mind is our guy won the election, therefore we can do what we want to do, regardless of whatever Constitution you're talking about, because that's old and antiquated. And they have the same attitude when it comes to the Bible. Oh, it's old and antiquated. That's for a different time. It wasn't written for today. These type of excuses why they don't follow it. And she's absolutely right. We have these humanists out there. And one of the ones that I think, and I'm not going to, I won't put a link in here because I'm still going over some of his videos and stuff. And I was told that this other guy would set up a debate with this Sam guy. I said, I don't want to debate him, but I'll sit down and hang out and have a conversation with him, to talk about these things rationally, but I'm not going to debate somebody about it. I'm not saying that debates don't matter, but I think conversation was actually carry more weight, especially if people see that opposing sides can be civil to each other. The Sam guy, he does use profane language, and so I'd have to put some stipulations on that. That hey, I got folks that would watch these hangouts, watch my videos, but they don't want to hear this profane language like I don't want to hear it. Some of these stipulations would have to be put forth. Maybe he'd adhere to them, maybe he wouldn't. But I'm not afraid to debate anybody, but I see the Sam claims to be a humanist. My biggest antagonist on Facebook is a humanist. She calls herself an ethical humanist. And they put all sorts of these titles around humanism, but it's still humanism, where they believe that man is the height of, and they don't call it creation, but the height of evolution. And this is all it's ever going to be. Once you're dead, you're dead. There's nothing beyond that. And, so they have this very, I think, dim, backwards view of humanity, creation, and all the evidence that is backing the Bible as God's Word, evolution, or not evolution, but to creationism and stuff like that. So I just wanted to bring this out to you to start this off, because this was actually feeding into some of the comments, and some of the folks that are really behind government control are humanist. And, you know, I don't know if that's a correlation with their politics, being a humanist, but a lot of the humanists and the politics and the regulations they want to put forth are very controlling. They're very progressive. They're very authoritarian. It's just like, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit tomorrow. This student up at, and I don't have the college name, but up in Canada, she's a teacher's assistant, showing a clip of Jordan Peterson, who is a psychologist, and he's a doctor, and he teaches in University of Toronto, I believe it is. He was on an interview, and she showed this to her students because they were discussing grammar and gender pronouns, and she basically got called on the carpet by the administration of the school. I think wrongfully. I've heard the whole thing and read all the statements, listened to the videos on both sides, and I think she was in the right and they were in the wrong. But over, Jordan Peterson, and maybe I'm simplifying this a little bit, but he is of the mind that you can't force me, because we're talking about free speech principles here. You can't force me to use your pronouns. It's just like, I have a lot of respect for doctors, especially if they're not quacks. And I've only known a couple of quacks in my life. And they were actually they were my personal doctors years ago out at Elysburg Family Practice. And that practice actually changed hands a few times. But they were quacks. But out of respect of the time that they put in and the knowledge they have, I call my doctor, I don't call him by his first name, I call him Dr. Joseph. That's his last name. When he comes to the room, I say, "Hi, Doc, how you doing?" Or I'll address him Dr. Joseph, but I show that as a sign of respect. But he can't force me to call him doctor. I've actually been corrected on that before by some guy. I didn't know they had a doctorate degree. I called it Mr. or whatever, and they're like, "No, it's doctor. I have a doctorate." And I'm like, "Well, I didn't know that." And when they put that out like that, it tells me the level of their humility when they want to be formally addressed that way. And so, it all leads into this whole thing with free speech and everything, which net neutrality is not going to protect free speech on the internet. It just can't, because it's government regulation, because somebody's going to come in and say, just like with YouTube and the adpocalypse with YouTube, someone, some progressives out there said that told the advertisers, do you know what you're advertising up against? And a lot of them, what was happening was they said that these videos were such and such, like alt-right, white supremacist, stuff like that, and they really weren't. I went and watched some of them that they claimed were this, and the advertisers got scared. Instead of doing the research on their own, they got scared and just pulled all their ads, and really caused some huge problems. And the progressives were loving this, although the progressives were caught up in some of this. Most of them were not. Most of them were not caught up in the adpocalypse. And that's because YouTube is run by progressives. But again, this whole idea all feeds into this humanism. It comes from a humanistic attitude. Now, enough on that. Another sip of coffee here. I have some articles here. This one I'm not going to get too much into, but Americans have been taxed. Let me get over to my other view here. Americans have been taxed, this is funny, $400 billion. And I say that tongue-in-cheek that this is funny. Okay? This is by the editorial staff over at nationaleconomiceditorial.com on November 27th of this year. Americans taxed $400 billion for fiber optic internet that doesn't exist. You can read down through this article here. As a matter of fact, let me just go ahead and get that over here on so you can see what I'm talking about here. I know the listeners over there won't be able to listen to this, or see this, but my YouTube audience will. Let me just get this up over there real quick. Okay. Now, South Korea is the poster child for high-speed internet. Its fixed connection and mobile download speeds are constantly among the fastest in the world, and its capital city, Seoul, is completely saturated with Wi-Fi. How did they do it? Being densely populated helped. And if you look at South Korea, I mean, you know, they're not a very big country. They're not like the United States where they spread as far as we spread, right? And I got some pretty interesting numbers to talk to you about here after this article here. Being densely populated helps. It's easier and cheaper to wire up crowded cities than empty countrysides. But the key element was the government's pro-broadband policies. Not only did they open up the market for competition among internet service providers, but they also invested in hard infrastructure. And I did do some checking on this, and they were actually using tax dollars to invest in this hard infrastructure. It wasn't like the town of Wilson, North Carolina, where they got a deal, had back banking. They put out some not mortgage, but financial instruments that were all like bonds, but they haven't had to use any tax dollars. The customers have paid. They paid all the bills due on that through the revenues they got off their customers, and it's unfair. It really is. It's unfair to compare a country like the United States that should be totally free market in every sector of the economy, not just a couple sectors of the economy. It should be free market in all the economy, and compare them to a government that has put, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars into infrastructure out of the coffers. Okay. Back in 2011, the New York Times reported that the South Korean planned investment of $24.6 billion in digital infrastructure. It paid off. South Korea's internet remains among the world's fastest, according to testing done by Speed Test, and this is in spite of massive recent gains and investments in other countries. Meanwhile, America's internet connections are slow, and they go through the whole, they talk about how we're ranked 9th in the world for fixed broadband speed, and we're ranked in the top 10. Ranking in top 10 is good, but the U.S. average download speed is less than half the top ranked. Singapore's 154.38 megabits per second. Again, another one of these, Singapore, very densely packed city. But they don't, as far as I can find out my limited research on this, they don't have internet monopolies in these cities. The internet, the people that supply the ISPs have to compete against each other. We don't have that here in America. We have local monopolies that were created by local government regulations that were bought and paid for by these ISPs. So we don't have this competition at the local level. And so what do you expect? Okay. The picture for the U.S. is not nearly as good when you look at mobile internet speeds, which the U.S. ranks 46, just ahead of Albania and behind Oman. Average download speeds in the U.S. is 23.5 megabits per second, which is less than half the average download speed in Norway. The Netherlands and Hungary, average upload speeds in the U.S. is 8.26 megabits per second, while mobile download speeds increased by almost 20% from July 2016 to July 2017. The U.S. world ranking fell from 44th to 46. Not good. Okay. And they go on, they talk about more and more things here, and this is the funny part here. We're down here. According to a fairly recent new book, 2015, called The Book of Broken Promises, the American people have been charged some $400 billion by telecom companies at the insistence of government for fiber optic upgrades that have not materialized. The author writes, by the end of 2014, America will have been charged about $400 billion by the local phone incumbents, Verizon, AT&T, and CenturyLink, and you probably put Comcast in there too, for a fiber optic future that never showed up. And though it varies by state, counting the taxes, fees, and surcharges that you have to pay every month, and many of these fees are actually revenues to the company or taxes on the company that you paid, it comes up to about $4,000 to $5,000 per household from 1992 to 2014, and that's the low number. You're also charged about 9 times to wire. This is insane, folks. You were also charged about 9 times to wire the schools and libraries via state and federal plans designed to help the phone and cable companies. So in other words, I'm going to stop the reading here. In other words, we were charged this, but where'd the money go? And see, what'd the government do with it? The ISPs didn't keep it. This is a tax that goes to the government. They had to pay that to the government, even though the customers actually paid for it. Where'd the $400 billion go? That's the question we need to ask. That's a lot of scratch. There's a lot of fiber lines that could have been put down for that amount of money, $400 billion. Okay? In fact, in 1992, the speed of broadband was detailed in state laws, as detailed in state laws, was 45 megabits per second in both directions. By 2014, all of us should have been enjoying gigabit speeds, 1,000 megabits per second. My whole rig here, from my computers, have Giganet Ether cards in them that have Giganet cables. Okay, they go to a gigabit router. That if they ever got it up to a gigabit, I'm set. I'm set for gigabit. I don't have to spend any more money, and I was kind of forward thinking in that. Of course, this didn't happen. America has relatively slow internet and just a 9.4% penetration rate for fiber optic cables, according to Business Insider. This is less than half the OECD average. The Trump administration would be wise to make improving America's digital infrastructure a priority. The South Korean model, market liberalizations, combined with hard investments, could be a viable model. If you're going to tax, and this is where I've always fallen down on excise taxes. If you're going to tax our gasoline, the gasoline I buy and everybody else around me buys, the diesel they put in their pickup trucks or Class 8 tractor trailers, if you're going to put an excise tax on that that's specifically supposed to go to the infrastructure, keep the roads maintained, rebuild them, the bridges, the whole 9 yards, that's exactly what it's supposed to be spent on. But when the government gets a hold of that, if they have another need, just like out in California, the Oroville Dam, there was money there to fix that before this almost near catastrophe happened last year. But what did California do? They diverted it to immigrants, to social services and stuff, and the heck with the dam. And then when they ran into problems with the dam, they didn't have money to fix it, even though they had the money originally. And see, that's what happens with taxes. So where did the $400 billion go? That would go a long way. And if you're going to tax something like that, just like the telephone companies, back when I was a kid, there was a tax there to help pay and fund the lines going out into rural America. And a lot of people didn't have a problem with that as long as it was going to be spent on that. And again, these guys that are for this net neutrality think that the government's going to do a better job than private companies. They're insane. I'm sorry, they're just insane. They're not students of history. They don't see these things that are happening. Okay? And one of the biggest, and this one really struck me, 13% of Americans don't use the internet. Who are they? 13% of people do not use the internet. Okay? And I was thinking about this morning, and this is why I went out and looked up this research by, this is by Pew Research, by Monica Anderson and Andrew Perrin, posted of September 7th of last year. And I was trying to find out how many people 65 and up do not use the internet. Out of the 13% of Americans who do not use the internet, 41% are 65 and above. And the reason why I was thinking that is you got folks like my father-in-law, my mother-in-law, my wife's aunt. And I have a lot of older folks that I'm associated with in the church that do not have broadband internet. They don't want it. They see no need for it at all. 41%. Now, if you take the total, I went to 325 million people. Okay, you take 13% of them. I'm not saying every last one of them are going to get internet, but this is just some numbers that you can wrap your head around. We're talking about individual people here. 13% of the population in America would be 42 million. Okay, 41%, 41% of those, that 13%, would equal out to 17, just a little over 17 million people. Now, what they're claiming in some of these articles I shared with you on Thursday and Friday, and I have them back in the show notes page today, is they're claiming about 34 million people are without internet. And so the 65 plus alone equals half of that. And if you just go back in, they have a bunch of stuff here. Adults, 13%. Okay, of that 13%, 12% are men, 15% are women. Of that 13%, 13% are white, 16% are black, 16% are Hispanic. Ages 18 to 29 is only 1% that don't use. These are all percentages of people that do not use the internet. 30 to 49 is 4%. 50 to 64 is 16%, and plus 65 is 41%. Anybody making less than $30,000 a year makes up 23% of the folks that don't use the internet. And it goes down through the numbers. 75,000 plus, there's only 3% that don't use. Anybody that has less than a high school diploma is 34% don't use. People with a high school diploma is 23% that don't use the internet. Some college, 6%. College plus is only 3% that don't use. Urban is 12% that don't use. Suburban's 11% that don't use. And rural's 22% that don't use. And these people, I'm just going to go down and read this real quick. For many Americans, going online is an important way to connect with friends and family, shop, get news, and search for information. Yet today, 13% of U.S. adults do not use the internet, according to a new Pew Research analysis of the survey data. Now, like I said, I extrapolated mine from the whole population. I need to go back and redo this. The size of this group has changed a little over the past 3 years, despite recent government and social service programs to encourage internet adoption. But 13% figure is substantially lower than in 2000, when the Pew Research first began to study the social impact of technology. That year, nearly 48% of American adults did not use the internet. The 2015 figure is 15%, is not statistically different from the current figure. A 2013 survey from the Center found some key reasons that some people do not use the internet. 1/3 of non-internet users, 34%, do not go online because they had no interest in doing so or did not think the internet was relevant to their lives. And another 32% of non-internet users said the internet was too difficult to use, including 8% of the group who said they were too old to learn. And cost was also a barrier for some adults who were offline. 19% cited the expense of internet services or owning a computer. And this is the one thing I was trying to find out before the show. Now let me do a real quick search here. Number of. So I want to get these numbers right, folks. I don't want to leave these. And this is probably just going to be a rough estimate. How many adults live in America? Wow. I'm not too far off. We're talking about 247 million. Rough. I'm just rounding it down. We could round it up to 248 because it's closer to that. So if we get real quick here, let me get my calculator out. And if someone knows something different than this, or thinks I'm way off base, please let me know. I'm trying to use the best numbers that I can. So you got 248 times 13%. That's 32,240,000 people that don't use. For whatever reason, they don't use it, whether it's cost, they don't think it's relative to their life or anything like that. So out of all the adults here in the United States, we have 32,240,000, and that almost accounts for the 34 million that people point to that are without internet. But they don't distinguish between those that are without it and those that don't want it. And I think Pew Research is going through here, and I was just going by age, folks. and that stat where 65% is 41. So you have the 32,000. So you times that by the 41%, and there's 13,218,400 roughly adults 65 and above who don't use the internet. Not that they don't have. My wife's aunt has access. My father-in-law has access because I live right next door to him. A lot of the older folks I know live in subdivisions and stuff that have cable internet. They just don't want to use it. So, like I said, I wanted to be more accurate on my numbers there, and I do apologize for that. I didn't think, for some reason, I wasn't thinking right. I was just using like total population of the United States instead of the adult. But the numbers still aren't too far off from what I was saying. A little over 32 million don't use the internet. So, if we're at that number and they say there's 34 million without, we're talking about a discrepancy of about 3 million or 2 million, a little under 2 million adults that don't have internet. So you got 2 million, approximately 2 million adults, according to their numbers that I was reading some of these other articles, that want internet but don't have it. And it's just like the Medicare, the Obamacare stats. You know, you got 50 million people without health insurance. But you ask them about it, they never break that down. There was somewhere between 24 and 30 million young adults between the age of 18 and like 32, something like that didn't want it. Didn't want the expense of it. So that knocks that 50 million way down. And then there's other factors in there. There's some other adults in there that are self-insured, and there's quite a few million of those that just had saved up money. They were wealthy and well-to-do enough that they didn't need medical insurance. And there was a big chunk of that. So you keep whittling away at those numbers that these progressives put out. And that's why I said I wanted to be a little more accurate on that as far as the adults in the United States. So you have that. Okay. Now, and let me see here. I didn't get this one up here. I touched on these real quickly about the there's a new broadband strategy by Microsoft. Let me get this in here. And this is a blog. Microsoft on the issues. Okay. Using white TV space technology in Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands. One of the other, and look, I am not a technology guru. I am not. Do I use technology? Yeah. Do I know how to build a computer from scratch with parts? Yes, with a little help as far as making sure I'm getting my connections for my USB here and there and stuff like that. Yes, I can do that. My main computer I use here, I built with a little help from my son. Okay, I'm not an idiot when it comes to technology. I know how routers work. I love Buffalo routers, and able to go in and tweak those things. My D-Link, you can't go in and tweak them like a Buffalo router, but it works pretty good. Anyway, I digress. I'm not ignorant when it comes to technology, as some of the folks assumed, or just, they didn't even assume it. They just flat out told me that I was stupid when it came to technology. And, you know, one of them even went so far to saying, you don't even know about the internet or how it actually works and stuff like that. And said, I'm probably just somebody that's come on just in the past couple of years. But the sad fact of the matter of it is, I used to, now we're talking back in 83, 84, when the ship first got their Trash 80s, their Texas Instrument, I believe they were Trash 80s. They had a very, at the time, this hard drive was huge. It had a 554 megabit or something like that. It wasn't very big compared to today. Hard drive, and through radio transmissions and everything from the ship, because that's the same way our phones worked. I can make a phone call on the ship to my mom's house, and it went over radio waves from the ship over to a receiver. I don't remember exactly how everything worked, but I could talk to my mom off the ship, and we weren't hooked up to a landline. And so I could talk to the supply depot in Charleston, South Carolina, without getting on the phone, and I was typing it on a computer, on on a green screen computer, which meant all the letters on there were green against a black background. It was a little bit slow, slower than it is now, but I could communicate. And that was back when the internet was still, I don't think it was, I believe the government had to be still using it, but it was on the verge of being commercially popularized, as it were. And the internet was growing because of the commercial ventures that were actually taking this technology, developing protocols, programming protocols like the TTP and TPC, I think it is, the internet protocols. And look, I don't know all the jargon that goes along with everything there. I just know that there's packets that are delivered, stuff like that. So I'm not ignorant when it comes to technology. I've been doing a lot of research on this. And I was told, I told this one guy, I said, Microsoft has been working on TV white space technology. And he pretty much told me, he says, you don't know what you're talking about. You need to stay out of it. He said, there's no way that's ever going to work. And it's a theoretical, I guess is what he called it. I'm like, but I just read an article the other day, November 20th of this year, using TV white space technology in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. This is by Shelley McKinley, General Manager, Technology and Corporate Responsibility over at Microsoft. And this is from Microsoft on the issues. It's their blog. Okay. I'm like, they're actually deploying this stuff. They've already tested it. It works. In Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, I think it's a better test bed down there than it is out in the Midwest, and I'll explain to you why. More than 2 months have passed since Puerto Rico and the Caribbean were hit by devastating hurricanes. Like so many people and organizations around the world, Microsoft wanted to help. Following our immediate emergency responses, we are continuing to work with government agencies and nonprofit partners to help communities to recover. Following the initial donation, we are providing cash, technology, services, and telecommunications support to people and organizations working to support the recovery process in the region. To date, Microsoft has donated more than $5.1 million in response to the recovery efforts, including cash grants, employee matching funds, technology, and services. While we all sympathize with the struggle people in the region face as they work to rebuild their lives, it can be difficult to imagine the very real hardships people and organizations face on a daily basis. In Utuado, Puerto Rico, the mountainous region that was among the hardest hit areas, people and organizations are struggling with their most basic needs. Getting food, water, and health care are a challenge, and there are few ways to communicate with people outside the region. Imagine 2 months after the hurricane being unable to let your loved ones know you're okay, or being unable to work or to study. Microsoft is proud to help address this challenge. In partnership with New Hope, government agencies, local internet service providers, and local TV broadcasters, we have developed TV white space technology from our Airband initiative to Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. TVWS are unused blocks of broadcast spectrum located between the frequencies assigned to television stations. It creates wireless broadband connections over great distances in rugged terrain with no line of sight. In Utuado, I'm not sure, I know I'm not pronouncing that right, Utuado, TVWS has been used to reestablish internet connectivity to a food distribution site, a health clinic, and the University of Puerto Rico. These sites also serve as internet hotspots where people in the community can come and connect with their families and friends. So they have it up and working down in Puerto Rico. Across Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, there are still widespread power outages. Nearly 40% of cell sites are still down. Most people don't have internet service, and many TVs and radio stations aren't yet operational. TVWS technology is helping people in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands reconnect with people outside the immediate communities. In addition to Utuado, we have TVWS sites up and running in Humacao, Puerto Rico, and in the U.S. Virgin Islands in St. Croix, St. Johned, St. Thomas, and TVWS will soon be working in Barranquittas and San Lorenzo in Puerto Rico. Our hope is that TVWS broadband connections will hasten the recovery of Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands, making it a little less difficult for people in the region to communicate and recover. While it's heartening to see some programs, there's still much work to do. We're committed to continuing to play our part in the months and years ahead. So, folks, like I said, I was being berated because I kept bringing up this TV white space technology, that it's still theoretical, it'll never work, and it's like, but I even said this, and I almost said it like this, but they've deployed it in Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands to get communications back up to hospitals, distribution centers, clinics, universities, and hotspots, so people can let people know what's going on. It's already being used. It is already in use. And I was told, I don't know how many times, that I was a technological dunderhead, in other words. And a lot of it was more profane than that. And that's not even profane. So, and I'm not doing this to toot my own horn. I'm a technological guru. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying I know how to research. I came across these articles about Microsoft and their white space technology, their TV white space technology, and I thought it was interesting. And if they could get it working, honestly, not that they can get it working, they have it working, but if they can scale it or upscale it to the masses, this is a game changer. This is absolutely a game changer, folks, because no longer will these communities that have these contracts, these monopoly contracts with like Comcast or Service Electric or Time Warner or Verizon or CenturyLink, no longer will they be able to have these. If they cannot get ISP connections in that town, we're talking about transmitting across TV white space. They might be able to get it in another town. Matter of fact, where their transceivers are, where they're broadcasting, they might be a small community there with a local ISP that isn't part of this big national network, where they can get on and actually get into these markets. White space, I believe, could be. I'm not saying definitively that it's going to be a game changer, but look, folks, it'll introduce competition into the picture. And guess what competition will do that all these people in net neutrality think net neutrality is going to cure, and it's not. Net neutrality was never about getting rid of the monopolies. Matter of fact, it was actually net neutrality, if you really read it, and I've been skimming over the 400 pages, and I didn't go through everything on it. I went through the pertinent areas on it. Does nothing to prevent these local monopolies. Nothing at all. Only competition can do that. Only competition can break up. First off, get the government out of it. Get rid of the government so there isn't a government-created monopoly. And then let competition take care of things. If this goes the way Microsoft thinks it's going to go, this, like I said, this white TV technology could be a game changer. How many people out there, and I know some folks, how many people out there wanted to move out in the country that have an internet business, but because of the lack of broadband out in rural areas, they couldn't do it. They wanted to, but couldn't do it. But they could pick up TV signals. Okay? And you know what? And this is the other thing here. TV transceivers that broadcast TV signal, your audio and your video. Huge, huge power requirements for that. Huge. But when you're just talking about data, because even video over the internet, it comes in packets. Comes in data packets. Okay? So let me, real quick here. Let me get over here. I just want to open up my network. Right now, I turned this on. My daughter turned this on, but I didn't fire it up until like 9 o'clock this morning. I have sent 293 million bytes since I turned the computer on this morning. I've been up for, well, this says here, I was up for 3 hours and 19 minutes so far. And I've received, over a gig. I've received over a gig. I've sent over 933 million bytes. And it's still climbing. And like I said, I may be wrong about this, but I don't think so. It doesn't take as much power to push that bandwidth over those white spaces as it does a audio and a video signal. Now, I was reading some of the stuff that got kind of in the technological weeds, but I was reading some other articles that pertain to this, some of the technical stuff, and that's pretty much what they're talking about. And that sort of put a kibosh on the fears of people that still broadcast TV to rural areas, that it would interfere with their signals. Well, the power wouldn't be enough to interfere with their signals. Okay, so it's, like I said, it's a new emerging technology. It's already been deployed in Puerto Rico. It's working. They've gotten people connected, and that's a good thing. And again, I believe that's eventually that's going to be a game changer in that. So I have other articles in here. I have some PDFs on the May 2015 net neutrality bill. You know, I was scolded over the weekend. Well, nothing in the bill of the 2015 bill says anything about net neutrality. And I said, yeah, but that's what you guys want to call it. That's what everybody's calling it. You know, so don't shoot me because I'm using the same term everybody else wants to use. Okay? You know, and a lot, like I said, I was having some fun with these comments over the weekend because some of these folks, they, you hear the words that are coming out of your keyboard. It was one of the standard things that we were talking about over the weekend, that it just amazed me. And when I was showing my wife, I wasn't even explaining anything to her, you know, not that I need to, but she read that one this morning and she just started laughing. She goes, he typed that. I said, Lori, it's his comment right here. You know, and she goes, is this the type of comment you deal with? I said, yep, all the time. They have no clue what they're talking about. They're in a rant, and they're just going with what they think they know, and they really don't know it because they typed it and you can tell they don't know it. Folks, if you like the show, please give me a thumbs up or thumbs down and leave a comment. If you like the show, you dislike it, tell me what you don't like about it. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to it. Hit the notification button so you know when I have new episodes coming out. And also, I'm on Patreon and I'm on PayPal for direct support. I'm looking for patrons to support the show on a monthly basis. And that even if it's only $1 a month, $1 is more than what I had yesterday. So do that for me. And I enjoy coming to you daily and doing these shows. These are fun for me, and hopefully you see that come out in the show. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, you hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day, and God bless. We'll see you tomorrow at noon.